The president is known for over a year on his daily briefings that ISIS was growing as a threat. And yet we refuse to call the war against terrorism a war. You remember the mantra, Osama is dead and the terrorist threat is over, etc., etc. That's not correct, and the president knew that. Then he says we do not have a strategy. Folks, we got to have a strategy. We got to have a president that will stand up to the American people and demonstrate exactly what the dangers are to our national security, and then say, here is my strategy. Then he must come to the Congress and seek authorization. I don't know if I'm going to support that or not, depending on what his strategy is. We don't even know that yet. But I know one thing. I have serious doubts that this president has the will or the ability to conduct any military operation. He has a view of America of leading by following. And leading by following has caused all of these voids, and bad people have filled these voids.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
You know, I think we can go back to the beginning of the Iraq War and say that a lot of mistakes were made. I think mistakes have been made on both sides of the aisle. I think mission accomplished was a mistake. It was clear that we hadn't solved our problems at that point in time. And I don't disagree with the senator that I think as a United States senator, when the president comes to you with a plan, you have to consider it. And I'm actually happy to hear Senator Roberts say he would consider it, because previously he said he would fight President Obama at every turn, and I think that's a much more reasonable position to take.
Our next question comes from Nick Schween, managing editor of the Hayes Daily News, and this will be directed towards Senator Roberts.
Where do you stand on the issue of legalization of marijuana in the U.S.?
That's not a federal issue. That's a state issue. If you want to get a Rocky Mountain high, go west. That should be for the Kansas legislature and the governor to decide, not federally.
You know, we've had a federal policy in this country since the Nixon administration that doesn't seem to be working. We've spent over $1 trillion on it. With that said, as the senator has mentioned, we do have states that have started to work with different policies as it relates to legalization. And I think it would be prudent for us to take a step back, watch what happens in those states before we determine how we want to change federal policy.
Senator, would you like the rebuttal time on that?
I don't have a rebuttal.
Okay. The next question comes from Liz Montano, Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and this will be directed first towards Mr. Orman.
The Patriot Act was hammered out in short measure following 9/11 and is now believed by many to be an overreach by the federal government, which unduly infringes on the rights and civil liberties of law-abiding citizens. A case in point could be the recent IRS scandal. Do you feel the Patriot Act is appropriate as is, or does it need modifications? Please elaborate on why you feel as you do.
Well, obviously we passed the Patriot Act at a time when our country was under attack by terrorists. And we passed it with great intentions and ultimately with the belief that this is what we needed to do to protect our citizens. And I think it's a very fine line that we walk between protecting our citizens and infringing upon their legitimate rights of privacy. And so what I would say is this is going to be an ongoing debate in our country. It's not going to be resolved in one election cycle. The Patriot Act will likely evolve, but it'll have to evolve as threats evolve. And right now, given what's going on with ISIS and the fact that we have named them as a terrorist organization, I think we need to make sure that we have the ability to protect the homeland, particularly if they're able to gain a foothold in the Middle East.
Senator Roberts.
I think we ought to keep the Patriot Act because of the terrorist threats that are growing. This is a delicate balance between civil liberties and our national defense, our safety in America. You mentioned the IRS scandal. I'm on the Finance Committee. We have been investigating the IRS scandal. And then all of a sudden, Lois Lerner lost her computer or her hard drive. And then there were 6 others. And so we refused to sign the Democrat report that said, well, we've gone enough and we can't get the communication from the White House or the Treasury. I want to tell you, there's a member of the Finance Committee that's bunk. I said, no, I'm not signing that final report. And I said, I will go to the floor of the Senate and I will talk about it. And so finally, on the Republican side, we said, we're not going to sign that report until we get to the truth. The first vote that I will have when I go back to Washington is an attack by Harry Reid, of all things, to change the First Amendment. To change the First Amendment. And I have 5 minutes to talk against Harry Reid. This is the man he supported with money. This is the man that he supported in regards to the Obama administration. He's not independent. He is a liberal.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, first, to address what Senator Roberts just said, I think we don't live in the information age so much as we live in the misinformation age. And I think what Senator Roberts wants to do is point to very, very small facts and distort my whole record. The facts are, I've supported both parties. I've been a member of the Republican Party, I've been a member of the Democratic Party, I've supported candidates from both parties, and candidly, I've been disappointed with both.
The next question comes from Michael Schwenke with KWCH Television in Wichita, and it will be directed first towards Senator Roberts.
Thank you. Our viewers often voice frustration with campaign finance laws, the amount of money involved in these races, and the ability of outside interest groups to fund certain candidates or issues. What's your opinion on candidates receiving money from those outside groups or interests?
Well, since I haven't received any, I really think the biggest issue of all is transparency. I think if people know where the money is coming from, I think that's the biggest reform we can make. I would also say that under the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling, they have ruled everybody has the right to free speech. That's the reason, by the way, that Harry Reid is going to try to amend the Constitution. He is. You can holler all you want, but Harry Reid has that amendment. And that amendment says, guess what? The Congress will determine how much money we can all give or anybody can give, and the Congress will determine what is reasonable. That is ridiculous. The Congress can't do a damn thing with Harry Reid at the helm.
Mr. Orman.
Senator, I've heard you say the word Harry Reid, Obama, fight a whole lot. What I haven't heard from you...
He's your buddy, man. He's your buddy.
What I haven't heard from you is solve problems. What I haven't heard from you... What I haven't heard from you is what you're going to do to get things done. And I think ultimately, that's what the voters in Kansas need to hear from you. Now, in terms of special interests, I have vowed that I am not taking money from PACs because I want to go to Washington and represent only the citizens of Kansas. I don't want to go to Washington and have to worry about what the pharmaceutical industry thinks about what I might be doing. I don't want to have to go and worry about what the oil and gas industry thinks about what I'm doing. I want to go and worry about what's in the best interests of Kansans, and I want to solve problems for all Americans.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.
I probably have 40 bills, 40 pieces of legislation covering every part of the Kansas economy that is being overregulated by this administration. the administration that my opponent is responsible for. 40 pending bills. I can't get them addressed. No Republican can offer an amendment in the Senate of the United States. We haven't had a budget in the Senate for 5 years. We don't do any appropriation bills. That's Harry Reid. He is a one-man rules committee. And it is a fact that you have given to Harry Reid, Hillary Clinton, President Obama. Why should anybody believe that you are independent?
Time. The next question comes from Nick Sween, managing editor of the Hayes Daily News, and this question will be first directed toward Mr. Orman.
What is your stance on gun control as it stands in the U.S.? Is it too little, too much? Are you comfortable with it now?
You know, I'm a gun owner. I own 2 guns. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the rights of people to keep and bear arms. When I got my guns, I had to go through a background check. And it was a relatively quick process. It took 5 minutes, and ultimately I was able to buy my guns without delay. I don't think that having a loophole that allows people who couldn't get guns at a legitimate gun dealer to get them otherwise is sound policy. And so I would be open to addressing the gun show loophole. And I think if you think about who gets prevented from buying guns, they're people we don't want having guns. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to figure out how to get it through the black market or figure out how to get it somewhere else. I just don't think it makes sense to make it easy for a convicted felon or someone who's under a restraining order for domestic abuse to be able to walk into a gun show and easily get a gun.
Senator Roberts.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. He's for the Second Amendment, but more federal controls, more federal requirements. I am for the Second Amendment. I have always stood for the Second Amendment to the right to bear arms. Now, let me point out, many of the things that my opponent has talked about are in law in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has the strictest gun control in America. And Washington, D.C. has one of the highest crime rates and resulting from guns in America. You can address that, but don't mess with people's right to bear arms with any restrictions. That's what President Obama does each and every time we talk about a crisis. That's what's going to come from the Obama administration. That's the man he supported. That's the man he gave money to.
Mr. Orman, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Actually, it's shocking that we didn't hear the name Harry Reid in that. It might be actually.
I just missed the opportunity. I'm sorry.
Well, I assumed it was because Harry Reid sided with you and voted against expanding background checks. So I guess we only talk about it when he doesn't vote with you. Ultimately, I think there has to be reasonable restrictions. We don't want people with bazookas. We don't want people with automatic weapons. Those are things that everybody agrees is reasonable. And I think that making sure that convicted felons don't have guns is probably a good thing.
The next question comes from Liz Montano, Kansas Radio Networks in Topeka, and it will be first directed towards Senator Roberts.
By dollars, Social Security is the biggest program run by the federal government. It's a program impacting someone in virtually every family in America. However, the financial stability of the program continues to be in question, with its trust fund predicted to be exhausted in 2036. What course of action would you push for to protect Social Security for today's seniors and strengthen it for future generations?
I'm not going to take away your Social Security. Don't worry about it. Anybody over 55 doesn't have to worry about any reform measure. You don't have to worry about doing anything with Social Security in the next part of this session. Harry Reid will block that real quick. It's not only Social Security that's broke. The United States is broke. $18 trillion worth of debt. And sometime, at some point, at some place, we're going to have to address all the entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But I will tell you one thing. With Obamacare taking money away from Medicare, that's a mistake. The Medicare reimbursement to our healthcare providers has caused a crisis to the rural healthcare delivery system. We have to save Medicare, we must honor the commitment to Social Security, and we have to fix Medicaid. I know that. But it's not going to happen now. It will happen when we change the Congress to a new Republican majority, and we can make a difference.
Mr. Orman.
By the way, just so we're clear, I agree that both chambers of Congress are run in an overly partisan way. I agree that Harry Reid is stopping progress on a lot of things, but so are the Republicans in the House. With that said, in terms of the question of Social Security, and I like the fact that Senator Roberts is talking about our $18 trillion debt, but let's not forget in the last decade, Senator Roberts voted for almost every spending bill. The presidential election in 2000 was the only election in my lifetime where we were talking about what to do with surpluses. And after Senator Roberts and Harry Reid went through spending, we spent trillions of dollars in the first half of that decade taking surpluses and turning them into deficits. So the idea that you're fiscally conservative is not necessarily demonstrated by the evidence.
Senator Roberts, 30 seconds rebuttal.